Hello and welcome back. In today's video, we'll be looking at one interesting and what seems like very difficult aspect of research. Let's look at our sampling technique. What do we mean by sampling technique? In a very layman definition, is this sampling technique refers to the way a researcher chooses a smaller group of people from a large group to study. So, for instance, let's say that you want to study factors influencing early marriage among youth in Alimosho local government, right? Factor influencing early marriage in Alimosho local government. Um, yeah, factor influencing early marriage among youth in Alimosho local government. So we want to, what will be our population? We know that our study area is Alimosho. Our study population will be youth in Alimosho, both male and female in Alimosho. Now, let's say we have about 5,000 youths in Alimosho. We can definitely time and fund, as the case may be, may not allow us to have access to the whole of this 5,000 youths in Alimosho. How then do we pick our sample? How do we pick our population from these 5,000 youths in Alimosho? That is all what sampling technique is about. The way a researcher would objectively pick their his or her population is what we refer to as sampling technique. So we have sampling technique is broadly categorized into two. The first one is the probability sampling technique, and we have the non-probability sampling technique. So let's look at the first one. In this video, we'll be focusing on the probability sampling technique, and in another video, I'll be talking about non-probability sampling technique. Now, in probability sampling technique, we have various types. We have the simple random sampling technique, we have the stratified sampling technique, we have the systematic sampling technique, we have the cluster sampling technique, and the multi-stage sampling technique. In simple random sampling technique, what we refer to as SRS. Now, in this technique, it gives every of the population a fair chance of being picked. So, for instance, the example I gave earlier that we have 5,000 youths in Alimosho. So, the 5,000 in simple random sampling technique, this 5,000 will be given fair chance in being picked. How do we do that? We could use the lottery method, where we put the whole of the names of the youths in that local government. We put them in a box and then we begin to pick. We just dip our heads into the box and we begin to pick randomly. That's random sampling technique. The second one, the systematic sampling technique. This is usually done at regular intervals. So we create an interval. We could say we are using an interval of 5 or 10 or 6, 12, 18, as the case may be, or we could use interval of 10 every 10. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40. So we'll pick every 10 person, every 20, the 20 person, the 30th person, 40th, 50, until we get the desired number. The next one is the stratified sampling technique. This in stratified sampling technique is a little bit different and a little bit technical than SRS and systematic sampling. In stratified, you divide your population into subgroup, and this subgroup is usually referred to as stratas based on specific characteristics. So we can say from our 5,000, how do we share these people into groups? We can now say, okay, let's divide Alimosho into let's say streets. Good. So we say, how many streets do we have in the whole of Alimosho local government? How many streets? So if we have 50 streets, right, in Alimosho local government, so from all of the 50 streets, we can say we will pick 5 youths each from each of the 50 streets until we have the desired number. Do you understand? That is stratified sampling technique. So we randomly, after dividing our population into strata, then we'll begin to randomly pick from each of these stratum. Now the next one is cluster sampling. Cluster sampling. This is similar to systematic sampling, but in this case we would not be dividing our population into strata, but we'll be dividing our population into a cluster. So we can use a cluster, maybe schools, maybe churches, maybe we just create a cluster and we'll begin to randomly select from each of this cluster. And finally, in the probability sampling technique, we have the multi-stage sampling technique. So this is a combination of different probability sampling technique. So we'll do it from the simple to the complex population. So we can use is a combination of both systematic, stratified, simple random, and systematic sampling technique. So I hope we do understand now how sampling technique is done and how we can pick up our sample from our population. In our next video, watch out for the next video where I'll be talking about the second type of sampling technique, which is a non-probability sampling technique. For now, take care.